This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Right, so I think we're just about ready to start. As I say, we're not, if the school visit does come in, custom and practice is that we say hello and welcome them, but currently we're not expecting one, but I did see some kids out there, so.
Good morning. Welcome to the Confirmation Hearings Committee of the London Assembly. As agreed at the Assembly's annual meeting on the 10th of May 2024, the Confirmation Hearings Committee is allowed to appoint a chair on a meeting-by-meeting basis for the 2024-25 Assembly year. For the first item of business, I will conduct an election for the chair for this meeting in accordance with the GLA's standing orders. In the event of one candidate being nominated, I will declare the nominated candidate chair of the Confirmation Hearings Committee for this meeting. A proposer and a seconder is required for each nomination. In the event of two candidates being nominated, I will ask for votes in favour of each candidate. Are there any nominations?
I'd like to propose to nominate Assemblymember Garrett.
Thank you. And thank you.
Seconded.
Are there any other nominations? Thank you, members. Then I declare that Assemblymember Garrett is elected Chairman of the Confirmation Hearings Committee for today's meeting.
Thank you, everyone. So that takes us to, takes us to item 2. If I could welcome everyone. Sorry, I haven't done the welcoming bit, have I? Good morning. Can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Confirmation Hearings Committee? This is why they give me a script, you see, because you can't be trusted otherwise. Can you please make sure that you've got all your electronic devices switched to silent mode to avoid distractions or unwanted buzzing. The Chair of the Assembly has agreed that this meeting be called as a matter of urgency in order to hold a confirmation hearing for the Mayor's proposed appointee to the office of Chair of RE London within 3 weeks of the date of the receipt of the notification from the Mayor in accordance with Section 100B 4 subsection B of the Local Government Act 1972. Can I now ask our clerk, Diane Richards, if any apologies have been received for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Assemblymember Small-Edwards, for whom Assemblymember Hirani is attending as a substitute, and in accordance with Standing Orders 2.4 and 8.2 with the permission of the Chair, Assemblymember Bukhari is attending the meeting remotely as a non-voting observer.
Good morning, Assemblymember Bukhari and everyone else. We have one other quick bit to go through. So can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 4 and ask Assembly members if they have any other disclosable pecuniary interests to declare? Nope. Okay. And can I also invite Mete Caban, MBE, to declare any interest relevant to the business of this meeting or in relation to the proposed appointment?
None other than being proposed.
Excellent. I don't know why it is that the first thing that the chair says to you is to demand your register of interest rather than hello and welcome to the committee. But that brings us to item 5. Hello. Welcome to the committee, Mette Coban. The committee will be putting questions to you in relation to your proposed appointment to the office of Chair of Re-London. However, can I first ask members to note the background information circulated with the agenda for the meeting, the information received from the Mayor and the information received from the candidate? Good, nod, excellent. Thank you. We'll now move on to the question and answer session. So if I kick off with the first couple of questions. It's a sort of broad opening question, if I may. So what would be your key aims as Chair of Re-London?
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for convening to being here. I think the transition to a thriving circular economy is not just a necessity, but it's a key pillar in our fight against climate change and an essential pathway to achieving social justice. The shift to a circular economy offers us the chance to reduce emissions, create good green jobs, and lower costs for Londoners. More importantly, it gives us the opportunity to build a fairer, more resilient city where no one is left behind as we face the climate crisis. This is more than just about waste. It's about fundamentally reshaping our economy to meet the needs of both people and our planet. And as we do this, we must ensure that our efforts prioritise the most vulnerable communities, creating opportunities where they're needed most. If appointed as Chair of Re-London, I'll bring my passion for the environment and my unwavering commitment to delivering meaningful change for Londoners. I have a proven track record in the public sector, particularly in addressing the environmental and social challenges that cities face. As a former councillor and cabinet member for climate change, environment and transport in Hackney, I understand the complexities of implementing policies that can bring tangible difference for people's lives. For example, in Hackney, where we led the Zero Waste Hackney campaign, which engaged more than 5,000 residents at face-to-face with more than 2 million household items that were brought back into the circular economy, and introducing the fortnightly waste collection, which saw a 7% increase in recycling on street properties, as well as our estate recycling programme, which also saw a significant increase on recycling on our council estates. These practical experiences demonstrate the type of impact I want to have for Re-London. Re-London is at a pivotal moment. The implementation of collection and packaging reforms, simpler recycling as we move forward, and the development of zero waste policies represent real opportunities to shape the future of London's waste management and circular economy. But to fully capitalise on these opportunities, we need to ensure that Re-London is fully aligned with the Mayor's broader strategy and vision for London, and that we're working collaboratively with the boroughs and commercial partners. However, Re-London also faces significant challenges. London's waste management system is highly complex, as you all know, with many different authorities and stakeholders involved with each of their own priorities. Aligning these various interests and ensuring effective collaboration will require strategic leadership. Additionally, as a statutory body, Re-London faces the challenges of securing sustainable funding while being dependent on diverse sources. In these times of economic uncertainty, securing the financial stability of Re-London will be essential to scaling circular economy initiatives and delivering real impactful change. To address these challenges, my priority as Chair will be to secure a sustainable financial future for Re-London. But just as importantly, I'll focus on strengthening partnerships across the city. By aligning the Mayor's vision with the needs and ambitions of boroughs, government and private sector, we can unlock the full potential of the circular economy to reduce waste, increase recycling and make London a global leader in sustainability. The opportunity we have is not just about mitigating the impacts of climate change, but it's about the jobs that we spoke about. It's about thinking about how we can make sure that we really tackle social inequality at its heart. And that's the vision that I'm deeply committed to and ready to lead Re-London through the several years ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so that's quite lengthy. That's not a criticism, an observation. But in terms of the key aims, so in terms of the period of time, so this would be a 4-year appointment, what's the key, maybe 1 or 2 things that you'd like to get done in that period?
Sure. So a couple of things. So the first thing that I would like to see, if appointed to becoming Chair of Re-London, is a much more joined-up approach across the different waste authorities around the visions around how we could work much more collaboratively across together around waste reduction. Fundamentally, at the core of building a circular economy, we've got to tackle the issue at its core, and that's about waste reduction at its core, and thinking about not producing materials that we can't reuse and that has to be disposed, and obviously then has a detrimental impact on our environment. So thinking about when I used to be the Vice Chair of the North London Waste Authority, we developed our waste reduction strategy, and it's about thinking about how do we work across the different waste authorities in London to make sure that we've got that alignment. And London has a huge and important role to play in making sure that those innovative ideas are able to thrive between those waste authorities and bringing that alignment. That's one. The second thing is about making sure that our boroughs have the support that they need in order to meet the Mayor's ambitions on reaching its recycling targets, but also, again, around waste reduction. So it's about making the case for London to government around making sure that they've got the adequate funding and the support that they need to be able to do what they need to. The other final thing that I would just say is about behaviour change. It's about raising the profile of circular economy. There's a number of initiatives that the London currently runs, i.e. Repair Week, that happens, I believe it's happening in March. The Circular Economy Week, which I just launched, I believe in October, and various other initiatives that London run. And I think it's really important that if we are going to embark on building a circular economy, there's got to be a sense of ownership, co-ownership by the public. The public has to have a role in making sure that it has a role in how it shapes our strategy as it moves forward. And I think behaviour change is going to be a really important part of that.
Okay, thank you. And you've touched a bit on this, but think about your previous experience. How do you think your previous experience will help you as chair of London?
Yeah, so in my previous experience, I was a cabinet member for climate change, environment and transport in Hackney. Hackney has an in-source waste management service with over 650 members of staff. We've been running our waste services since 2002. There is a number of measures that I brought in Hackney when I delivered the £61 million Green New Deal, which included the move to a fortnightly waste collection, which is quite a radical move by local authority standards, particularly on driving recycling. What we did see as we moved to fortnightly waste collection was that recycling rates on street properties went up by 7%. We also replaced every single bin. So the practicalities of how you actually roll out a lot of these policies at a local level, I've got experience in. But it's also about that point I made around the behaviour change and the Zero Waste Hackney campaign. Over 2 million household items were brought back into the circular economy. Over 5,000 residents were part of that. That was a multi-award-winning sort of campaign that we ran. We also created a circular economy knowledge base as well, which was able for our staff, but also people from across the borough that were able to tap into those resources to think about their own carbon footprint. Our estate recycling programme. Now, this is a really important one because I think when we talk about waste in London more broadly, one of the complexities of London in terms of waste is that we have a mix of housing tenure, very high density, but also very high levels of social housing, especially in a borough like Hackney, where more than 50% of our homes were social housing. And the challenges, for example, for myself, for example, my parents are of Turkish Cypriot origin who can't speak English, who are passionate about how they can, benefit their community, but how do you communicate with people like my parents who, for example, may not know how to best utilise the resources or the infrastructure on an estate? So we ran a massive campaign on estates, thinking about the infrastructure, so making sure we had the adequate infrastructure, closing the chutes, but also making sure that we were working with residents, the residents associations, TMOs, to make sure that we were able to do that transition. And since running that estate recycling programme on those specific estates, the recycling rates went up from 8.7% to over 28%, which showed the significant improvement. And if you look at most boroughs where you look at the average recycling rates, the bit where they struggle with most is obviously on their council estates and their social housing, and that's something that I've got practical experience in being able to deliver. So being able to bring that expertise, using London as an opportunity to be able to share that expertise, finding those common wins that we can sort of deliver on, and bringing boroughs' alignment on that is something that I intend to bring.
Okay. I think perhaps we'll come on to recycling rates in a little while. Did you say that fortnightly waste collection is a radical change? Don't most boroughs do that these days?
At the time when we brought it in, it was seen as a bold move to bring in fortnightly waste collections. But we brought it in.
When was that? 21, 22?
21.
Like okay. Okay. Assemblymember Harani.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the previous chair and the shoes that you're looking to fill, the previous chair, Liz Goodwin, had previously acted as a CEO of the government's Waste and Resource Action Programme. Are you confident that you have the skills and experience, both personally and with other board members as well, to effectively oversee and provide the strategic guidance that will be required in this role?
Yeah, thank you, Assembly Member Rani. I think my predecessor done an incredible role, Liz, to be able to take Re-London through the rebranding stage of the authority, all the way to thinking about how we're able to really scale and make sure that Re-London has a relevant and fit purpose in terms of where it is now. And I think that should be noted on record. I think where I differ from my predecessor is being able to bring the strategic oversight into to this role, particularly thinking about the partnerships and collaborations that I have from my previous experience of being a councillor, my experience that I have in local government. I've already been adopting that in my role as Deputy Mayor so far in the past 4 to 5 months. So when you look at our announcement on our pledges to clean our waterways and rivers, being able to bring together different various actors to be able to join up to that joint pledge, that's something that I was involved in. But also just last week we launched and announced the Greener Schools programme, and that required collective action from boroughs. Again, that was something that I was able to do in my first 4 to 5 months. So one of the key things that I'll be looking to do in my role, and one of the experiences that I bring to this role, is the relationship that I have with boroughs and being able to bring that, because that's going to be ultimately, the reality is if we are going to take this issue head on, you know, there's only so much we can do from City Hall. There's only so much government could do. Ultimately, it requires the boroughs to be able to lead us on the front line. So I think that alignment across boroughs, Re-London and GLA have both adequate and the expertise within their respective teams, and I'm hoping to work with them and the experts to make sure that we're able to deliver on the Mayor's ambitions and also deliver for London.
Okay, and obviously public sector finance is still not in a great place. How do you hope to deal with any resistance for any change?
Yeah, of course, it's a very important point that you raised. I mean, I reflect on my recent experience of being a cabinet member in Hackney, and year on year we had to make very difficult decisions, particularly in waste management, around savings because of the dire situation that public sector finances were in, as you very rightly point out. And as a result of that, you're having to make very difficult decisions that have real life impacts on people's lives. So I think coming into this role, my role, and as Deputy Mayor too, is about making sure that I'm banging the drum for London and making sure that I'm, you know, being that advocate for London boroughs at a national level. And I think that's one of the things that I could bring into my role, is around, as well as bringing alignment on vision, it's about making sure that I understand what are the key asks from across all the different waste authorities, and making sure that we're going into government with the right level of ask and making that case for more government support.
Okay, and how do you hope to combine the chair role of Re-London with your role as Deputy Mayor?
I think this is a really important question, and I think that actually it's really positive that I think for Re-London to have someone in my role as Deputy Mayor chairing Re-London. The reason why I say that is because it shows just how much of a priority and how much of this we're putting at the core of our mayoralty in this term. It's really important to really think about that alignment between Re-London and the Mayor's vision. I mentioned the issues around the complexities around Re-London's funding. You know, they haven't been receiving government funding since 2015, I believe. And so as a result of that, they've had to diversify their funding streams. And since diversifying their funding streams, that means that they obviously have responsibilities to other funders. So I think it's important that in the context of, you know, Re-London expanding its funding base and obviously having much more wider remit of answerable, I guess, like people to respond to, having the alignment of having the Deputy Mayor to sort of chair Re-London, I guess it allows me the opportunity to, one, bring about that partnership and collaboration across London, because I'm always talking to the different boroughs anyway, so it would just be an additional role that I'll be able to sort of really further champion, but also it's making sure that it's closely aligned to that of the vision of the Mayor.
Okay. And so what do you feel would be the main challenges for you as chair of Re-London, and how do you hope to overcome these?
I think the main challenges for me as chair of Re-London would be the highly complex nature of London's waste system. And I say that in the sense that, you've got different waste authorities, some of them joint, some of those unitary. You've got the commercial, the businesses, and you've also got the wider sector, and they've all got different responsibilities and each of their own different priorities. So, and there's also some big changes coming forward, be it around the Simply Recycling scheme, be it around, various different things that are coming in the pipeline. So I guess the real challenge is as we're going through these major changes, we've got very ambitious targets on net zero with our 2030 targets, but also nationally on what government set out on this too, is we need to move forward on this agenda, because we know that this is one of the key forms of carbon emissions, and one of the key challenges will be is how do you bring that alignment together in a very highly complex waste system that requires lots of different actors to sort of work together. The other key challenge, as I mentioned, is, and I will keep making that case, is the financial challenge, which is both to boroughs, as you've obviously rightly alluded to, but also to Re-London as an organisation itself. And if I was to be appointed as chair, my role will be to make sure that, and I'll be working very hard to sort of explore ways in which how we can make sure that we future-proof Re-London's future by making sure that it's got the sustainable forms of finance that it requires to deliver for London and Londoners.
Thank you. That's it from me, Chair.
Thank you. Next question from Assembly Member Wilson.
Oh, okay.
Was that a surprise?
No, although I thought Caroline might want to go first.
Assembly Member Russell. Yep, I'm fine either way.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, Mate. So I just want to dig in a little bit more about the non-party political nature of the chair of Re-London as against a party political role, which is Deputy Mayor for Environment. So I just want to kind of understand a little bit more, because you've talked about delivering on the Mayor's ambitions, but Re-London delivers on the statutory document, which is the Environment Strategy. And so I'm just wondering if you have thought about how you are going to manage that role as chair of Re-London, where you don't have a party political hat on, and your role as Deputy Mayor for Environment, where you do have a party political hat.
Thank you, Assembly Member Russell. I think firstly it's just important to clarify that my role as Deputy Mayor is for all Londoners. I mean, it's not a political role.
It is, though, a mayoral appointment. It's one of the kind of you're part of the, is it 11 plus 1 of the mayor, or 12 plus 1, whereas Re-London chair is absolutely outside of politics.
Well, look, I mean, in relation to my current role, I don't apply any party politics to it. I'm a Deputy Mayor for all Londoners, and what I've been able to demonstrate over the last 4 months is that I'm willing to work across all different political parties to make sure that we deliver for Londoners. And, whether that's at a borough level, for example, last week when we launched the Greener Schools programme, I was out with the leader of the Kensington and Chelsea Council launching the programme, who is of a different political party that as of I used to be as a councillor, for example. So I operate as Deputy Mayor, operate for all Londoners, irrespective of political party. I'm very conscious about the role about Re-London specifically itself, and that's something that I'm committed to doing, is making sure that we're delivering on the Mayor's priorities, as you say, making sure that it delivers on the GLA's priorities, and my role would be to bring all of that together to deliver for Londoners.
Mm-hmm. I suppose, sorry, I phrased my initial question badly. The Re-London is delivering on the statutory obligations in the Environment Strategy, and as Deputy Mayor, you're delivering, I think you've said in other meetings, that you're delivering on the manifesto commitments of the Mayor of London. So it's that difference in those two roles, and I just wonder if you have any reflections on the challenges of that, and the way that on that difference, because obviously the statutory stuff in the environment strategy, there are targets that are kind of, that are being missed at the moment, and I think what we've seen in the manifesto is sort of there's not a huge amount about waste, so it's just how are you going to kind of align those two different types of delivery?
Yeah, I think just to give you assurance, Senator Russell, that my role as Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy is to work for all Londoners, and it's also to make sure that we deliver on London's environment strategy, as well as the Mayor's manifesto pledges, as well as all these things. So, I intend to carry out the role in light of exactly what it set out in the London Environment Strategy, and to deliver that. And that's the sort of the premise of which how I would operate in this role.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Before I won't surprise Assemblymember Wilson by jumping straight to him. I'm slightly curious about this idea that your role as Deputy Mayor isn't party political, because your job is to implement the Mayor's manifesto, and the Mayor's manifesto as it stands now was the Labour Party manifesto for Mayor a few months ago. And I mean, you could make the comment you make about governing for all Londoners. I mean, members of the His Majesty's government could say that they are the Education Secretary for the whole of the country, that they're the Chancellor of the Exchequer for the whole country. But it's very clear that they're Labour Party politicians who are implementing a Labour Party manifesto. And when I hear them on TV, they don't seem to give a lot of credit to the Conservative Party. And people, I think, observe that the Mayor's 10 deputy mayors operate in much the same way. And I don't think that surprises anybody. So do you not see it as a party political role?
No. My role is being Deputy Mayor for all Londoners. I believe under the GLA Act, I'm also politically restricted too. So I don't undertake political activity in my role as Deputy Mayor. I'm a Deputy Mayor for all Londoners, and that's how I've been conducting myself since I've become Deputy Mayor in July. And I intend to work, as I have been, working across all different political parties, whether you're Labour Party, Conservative Party, Green Party, Liberal Democrats, whichever party you are, to make sure that we deliver for Londoners. That's my focus.
Okay. Just for example, one of my colleagues, you recently launched a 358 bus down in Bromley. I believe Bromley Council gifted TfL a piece of land to be able to do that. But I did notice that the local Labour MP turned up, and I did notice that no one from Bromley Council was invited, or the other Conservative MPs along the rest of that route. So that doesn't look non-party political.
Well, I think just to be clear on that point, that was a TfL-led event. It wasn't organised by the GLA or the environment team. I was invited to go to that event. I had no oversight over the invite list. I think that's something that you would need to take up with TfL. I know Assemblymember the Assemblymember Terrell in question, he's raised that with me, and I've raised that with TfL on his behalf. But as I say, it's not something to do with me. And as I said, I've engaged with other party members, other political parties on different visits, i.e. last week at Greenwich Schools, I was together with the leader of Kensington Chelsea, which is a Conservative Party leader.
Okay. I suppose I just observed there's a difference necessarily between perception on different sides. But Assemblymember Wilson.
Thank you. Good morning. So you mentioned the importance of behavioural change. I think telling people that the way we travel can have a huge impact on the climate whilst racking up 40,000 air miles yourself, not a great look, is it?
So, firstly, just to be very clear, I've never tried to tell people how they should or should not live their lives. I think in relation to the flights that you refer to, they relate to my role previously as the Chief Executive of My Life, My Say, where I make no apology for banging the drum for young people at some of the highest levels of institutions, be it at the United Nations, at the White House. Of course, moving forward, I'll make sure that where I do travel, it's related to work and I can avoid flights. And since I've become Deputy Mayor, that's what I've been committed to doing.
Thank you for that clarification. It just, again, kind of hinting, in similar vein to Assemblymember Garrett's kind of line of questioning, perception, I think, is everything or a very large part of politics, and I think it's important, and this is more of an observation, I guess, rather than a question, but I think it's important to kind of be cognizant of not giving the impression that some rules are okay for some people to follow, and other rules are okay for other people to follow. That's how we ended up with Partygate. You don't want to be another Boris Johnson, do you?
I definitely don't want to not like Boris Johnson. Yeah.
Well, he ended up as Prime Minister, and I thought we were being non-partisan in this whole discussion. I think we now, if we draw back to the topic at hand, Assembly Member Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I want to specifically pick up on recycling rates, which you've talked about a bit already in the earlier section of the meeting. But London's recycling rate still remains stubbornly low compared to the targets. So overall, 32.7% in 22-23, and that didn't go up since the previous year. And the Mayor's target is obviously at 65% of municipal waste by 2030. So that would be a massive challenge to get us there in 4 or 5 years? I don't know. So what's the role of Re-London in making sure that London as a whole gets to that target?
Yeah, thank you, Assembly Member. Pardon me, my voice is still recovering from the weekend. Thank you, Assembly Member Baker, for that important question. I think it's really important to highlight that recycling rates have been stagnant nationally across all regions. And actually, I think London is the only region where it hasn't decreased in the last year. But obviously, still not good enough for us in London. We've obviously got very ambitious targets to reach the 65% by 2030. And I think that there are some movements that are happening nationally, which hopefully should start to see a shift towards much more higher recycling rates, like the standardisation of how we treat the waste itself, and obviously how we collect. It's going to be really important. I think supporting those government reforms is going to be really important, and I think Re-London has a huge important role to play in terms of making sure that we have a very coherent sort of package of measures that we can able to represent on behalf of London, on behalf of all London boroughs and the GLA to government, and that's something that I'll be looking to do if appointed as chair. But also making sure that we're able to work across the different boroughs to bring about that alignment, particularly thinking about some of the quick wins, so looking at areas where, and obviously, again, I say this with no, trying to find the right way to word this. I understand that every different part of London is very different, so we have to recognise the different the demographics of Londoners and London. We've got to think about the sort of like the different infrastructure around London. And there will be different sets of measures that will work in some places and won't work in some places. But where there are some quick wins that we're able to support across different waste authorities, I think being able to use my role as chair of Re-London would be incredibly important. The other thing I would say is that if you look at the simpler recycling reforms that will be coming forward, for the first time that will bring in measures around businesses specifically, which will be an important factor, because obviously that fits within the wider recycling rate targets that we have, but previously we've obviously had no means to sort of be able to control that, and I think hopefully as part of the simpler recycling measures that will be coming in place in the forthcoming years, that should see an improvement on recycling rates on businesses, both in terms of dry recyclables, but also thinking about food waste as well.
Thank you. And you mentioned sort of quick wins. I think you were sort of talking about basically things that might be being done in some areas that could be taken to others. So a role to sort of sell that. Can you sort of describe what some of those might be?
Yeah, there were some great initiatives, for example, that in Hackney that I led and worked with. One of them was looking at how we develop a circular economy zone. Mm-hmm. Hackney Wick is crowned as a sort of a leading circular economy pilot zone in London. It's got loads of SMEs that thrive in that sector, both creating good jobs in the area, but also putting forward lots of initiatives that helps reduce clutter and help the environment, but also supports residents in terms of the cost of living crisis. One of those things, for example, is the Library of Things. The Library of Things is a fantastic initiative that looks at, for example, if you're going to buy a drill because you're going to do some household works, you're going to use it maybe once or twice a year, you're going to spend 150, 200 quid on it, and you probably will put it away in your cupboard and not use it again. Whereas you can actually just rent it for like an hour or two, probably save yourself over £100, so it helps you with the cost of living crisis, but also helps reduce clutter for my environment too. So I think initiatives like that can really think about how we make sure that we're supporting residents both in a socially just way in terms of their cost of living and their standard of living, but also thinking about what's going to help sort of remove and reduce sort of some of these materials from our environment in the first place.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that sounds like it would be a fantastic sort of awareness, I think, of sharing economy services is relatively low in London, I would think. So more provision and more awareness, I think, would be really positive.
Yeah, and just to say on that specific one, I gave the example of Library of Things because although it is a sort of a private, it is a business and a social enterprise, it does require sort of the collaboration with councils. And, you know, at Hackney Council, we had a very good operating model with Library of Things where we're able to look at how we incorporate it into our wider library services. And I think one of the struggles that most councils do have, Assemblymember Baker, is that just the thinking capacity to even think about how you maximise some of these partnerships. So they might have the sort of like, you know, they might have the appetite to do it, but where do you even start to even think about it? Do you even have the officer resource to even think about how you integrate it into your library services and the capacity to even think about the officer time to dedicate to that? So I think, you know, being able to use Re-London as a resource where it's able to support the different boroughs around their strategies to developing these circular economy zones and reducing waste, I think is going to be really important.
Thanks. And finally, just going back to waste, you talked about moves to fortnightly, not 4 weekly, bin collections and things like that, and reducing the access to chutes in blocks of flats. So obviously things like that are actually something we've seen quite widely across the country, reduction bin services, and let's be honest, it's also been done quite significantly before because of the cuts to local authority budgets. But considering how widely that is done and considering we're not seeing the recycling rates going up, is there really a positive correlation with that, or are we actually sort of making negative impacts on the way people think about their waste services? Are there other ways we can do this that can make a step change in recycling that don't actually just make it really, really difficult for people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, you know, again, there's no easy answer to this. And I don't think there is a simple answer or a simple solution. I think most of what we're talking about here today requires multi-layered approaches to what we're dealing with, but also thinking about multiple levels of communication for how you engage with residents, how you engage with all the different multiple stakeholders that you need to work with. I think specifically on the estates, one of the things that we found worked really well is that we wanted to approach it so we went through 5 different phases when we were moving through the estate recycling programme. And as we were moving through each of those stages, we were learning from the previous different phases as we went into the new estates to think about our approaches. And it can't just all be stick, it's got to be carrot as well. It's exactly to your point, so you can't just sort of take away key bits of infrastructure that people have been used to for forever. And also, we also know that with, for example, with rubbish, you know, rubbish attracts rubbish as well. So if you just dump somewhere on an estate, people might just dump more on there as well. So you've got to make sure that you don't just close the means of how people have been dealing with the rubbish and then not put the infrastructure there for them to adequately think about that, and also making sure they had the right levels of training. So what we were doing, and this is which I think is really important, and part of it is that when we were bringing about these changes, we wouldn't just sort of like go into a community or neighbourhood and say, hey, by the way, we think we're going to do these 10 different measures on your estate. Good luck, let's see how it works out. Actually, what we were doing, we were going in there, you know, really consulting and engaging with residents to understand what their needs were, how they were dealing with their sort of rubbish in the first place, and their sort of the materials. And then we were thinking about, okay, understanding, well, what sort of support would they want? And then we worked with them to deliver the infrastructure, the communications. And then what we found was that there was much more buy-in. Now, admittedly, you know, like, as I say, there was a significant increase from 8% to over 8.7% to over 28%, which is quite significant. Bearing in mind, in 2002, the levels of recycling on our estates were 1% in Hackney, so it's quite a significant increase, but it's still nowhere near where we need to get to the 65%. I think what we need in the long term is much more some of the national measures that need to bring about the change. So that's the sort of standardisation, the coding of our bins and the way it's treated. What happens to the waste, obviously, once it's put into the sacks and it's gone off. And also fundamentally, again, I think the key point here is getting to the root of the problem, which is around sort of the producing of these goods in the first place. So I think if we can get to a point, and I think this is part of my role as the chair, would be thinking about how we engage with the private sector, thinking about how do we engage with, for example, the fashion industry, thinking about textile, thinking about working with businesses to make sure that really at the source of this problem, we're able to not produce the materials that can't be reused in the first place, so we don't end up in a situation where we're then having to work our way backwards and thinking about what we then do with the waste and obviously the impact that has on our environment.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, somebody remember?
I just want a bit of clarification because obviously you talked about fortnightly recycling. Were you talking in relation to collection on estates rather than residential?
Good question. Sorry, I should have clarified that. So the fortnightly waste collection in Hackney was introduced only for on-street properties, not for estates. Not for estates.
Okay, actually, just on this question about recycling rates. So obviously, fundamentally, this is a service that's run by boroughs, and your role as chair of Re-London would be a sort of influencing, sharing best practice sort of role. So you made a lot of your track record in Hackney, but obviously Hackney has, I think the figures I've got here was 322 out of 343 boroughs, like, rank order of recycling. So that's not very good. And within London, it's 28 out of 33 authorities. So how would you be able to go to those boroughs? Let's take, Bromley as an example. Perhaps they're already irritated about being missed out on the bus launch. And then you go there and say, I'm going to help you fix your recycling rate. Well, they're already over the 45% that the mayor's set as a target. So why would they listen to you? What would you bring to the table that they wouldn't think that they already know more than you about because they're doing much better than you were when you were in Hackney?
Sure, great question. And look, I don't think it's a question of, me knowing more than anyone or someone knowing more than another person. I think, the most important thing here is how we work together collaboratively. In the case of Hackney, of course, it's very unique because it's got more than 50% of its homes are social housing on our council estates. So, of course, in terms of its ranking, it's always going to be lower because it's much more difficult and complex in terms of how you manage recycling, where you've got very high levels of density of council estates. And, some of the other, like, for example, people often cite Wales as very high recycling rates, but they've got huge garden waste where you don't have that levels of garden waste in London, which is one of the reasons why there's that disparity there. But we want to work and learn from Bromley. We want to work and learn from Barnet. We want to learn and learn from Lewisham. We want to learn from everywhere. And no one is going with the approach to sort of suggest that one borough knows it more than other. Each of those boroughs have been delivering for the residents and have been leading on that using their expertise. And we want to go on that asset-based approach where we sort of understand what is working locally. What can we share from Bromley that can work for Hackney? What can we share from Hackney that can work for Southwark or whatever it may be? And that's the sort of the culture that we want to build in London, which is working together to deliver for all Londoners.
But even if you, I'm looking here at the CPRE's most recent scorecard came out over this summer of, ranking of London boroughs on, they rank them on percentage of waste sent for recycling and also the total kilograms. In other words, if you reduce your waste, they mark you up for that as well. And you sort of, there are several inner London boroughs, Islington, Camden, Lambeth, they're all doing much better than Hackney. So in their rankings, Hackney is 28th, Lambeth is 8th, Islington is 14th. If we had someone here from those boroughs, they probably would tell us that it's difficult for their boroughs as well. But they're doing significantly better than Hackney. So I don't understand why, realistically, people in those boroughs who are doing better than your track record, why would they think that you're the person to come and head up this organisation that in theory is, talking about how to do things better?
Sure, look, absolutely. I think there's a lot that Hackney can learn from other London boroughs in terms of how it can improve its recycling rates and how it can boost circular economy. I think my track record coming into this role, as I say, I boosted over 10 years experience as a local councillor, having led on the front line. I've been able to develop and deliver the biggest Green New Deal for any local authority in London, £61 million on how we can reduce our carbon footprint. And Hackney developed not only a reputation across London, but also nationally on its ambition around tackling the climate crisis, particularly on areas like transport emission. But also, since I've become Deputy Mayor, one of the things that I've been able to showcase is the way I work, which is engaged and collaborative and working across all partners and stakeholders. And that's why, since I've become Deputy Mayor, I've probably done more than over 150 different external engagements in the space of 4 months, over 25 different boroughs. And the reason why I mentioned that is because it's all about that partnership working. So I think one of the reasons why I think, some of those partners that you would say, like, for example, Islington, I've got very good relationships with some of those boroughs that you mentioned, is partly because I've been able to work very closely with those boroughs on areas like the greener schools or what we're doing on rivers, for example, and already been able to demonstrate that 4 months into my role, and that's something that I'll be looking to do with Re-London.
But, I mean, I suppose, to my summary of what you just said is you've spoken about having meetings with people and having ambition, but when I look at what's actually delivered, what you actually delivered in Hackney, I think you actually said Hackney's got a reputation London-wide. I mean, if this is true, 28th out of 33rd is not the reputation of these are the people we want heading up this service.
You've got to look at the baseline of where it started from. So when I first took over in Hackney to where it is now, there's a 7% increase in our on-street property recycling rates. The estate recycling has gone up from 8.7% to 28%. If you look at our Zero Waste Hackney campaign, it's a globally recognised campaign, not just in London or the UK. It actually won a global award for engaging with over 5,000 residents face-to-face, but also 2 million households. We've also had 4 Zero Waste hubs, for example, over 850 residents who attended, 200 bikes were donated. So we're looking at loads of different innovative solutions. So I think the point about the Hackney is that, again, it's not that Hackney is the greatest. I can only offer you my experience from Hackney.
The data here suggests Hackney is among the worst. It's a long way from being the greatest. It's not even mid.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that Hackney has very different complexities that it faces with, because it's got a very highly densely populated borough. It's very culturally diverse as well.
Doesn't Camden have that? Doesn't Islington have that?
I'm not sure of the figures of Islington and Camden off my head.
I mean, but you know those places. I mean, if you go to Camden, it's not a low-density suburban borough, is it?
Well,
or Islington.
As I've said before, each borough has its own complexities. And, my record in Hackney shows a significant improvement to that of when I first took over.
OK. Assembly Member Russell, I think you had a question on this.
I certainly do, yeah. I just wanted to pick back up on the business of Wales, because 66% recycling rate, I do think, puts London to shame. And yes, they have more green waste, but that 66% is not entirely to do with their green waste. So I think we need to be thinking ambitiously for our city. And I'm thinking back to, when the mayor was first elected and the environment strategy was written, and all the conversations were about the need to boost recycling on estates, the need to boost recycling in dense flats, since that time, the recycling rates have really barely budged, and London's recycling rates, I would say, are in crisis. Now, there's lots of different reasons behind that, to do with, and I think, Re-London has obviously been struggling with inadequate funding to run the kind of projects that might actually deliver the kind of step changes in recycling that are required. But I also just wanted to check in about just one small detail about the Hackney rates, because I think the Hackney website says it went from hang on, just let me get the I've got the detail here. Yes, it didn't go from 8.7 to 28%, which I think what you said, but the Hackney website says it went from 9 to 18%. Just as a point of clarification, does that figure?
I think the figure you're referring to might be referring to estates more broadly. I think what I'm referring to, actually, I got it, so it's actually from 9.6% to 28.7%. I got the 0.8 and 9 mixed up, but that's for the specific estates where it was trialled, if that makes sense. I'm happy to share that with you.
That would be useful. Milton Gardens Estate in Stoke Newington, recycling levels doubled from 9 to 18.
So that might be referring specifically to that estate specifically. What I'm referring to is all of the estates part of the estate recycling programme. That would be the average figure.
So just getting back to the topic at hand, what do you think that you can do as chair to help Re-London to get to boost these recycling rates across our city?
Yeah, look, I think firstly on the Wales question, and I think the Wales question we could talk about for a long time. Wales, there's lots of differences between Wales and London. That's not in any way means to say that, you know, it gives us a pardon or for us not to be ambitious, but, you know, they've got more powers, they've got more garden waste. There's also complexities, I'm sure, you know, there is things that could be said either side. I think the key thing to, as I've highlighted before, London obviously in relation to other regions hasn't seen a decrease. Now, again, that doesn't mean that we are satisfied with that. We want to, you know, we're not happy with the rates of recycling that we are seeing in London. We want to see much more ambitious recycling rates, and especially as we've got the 65% for 2030 and our wider net zero targets. And what we're keen to do is obviously work together with boroughs, with government, to make sure that that's a reality. I think part of my role as becoming chair would be around sort of thinking around where's the strategic oversight, thinking about the profiling of the circular economy in the first place. Because again, a big part of this is no matter how many changes that are going to need to happen at a national, local or regional level to deliver on our ambitions, ultimately it comes down to everyday people and how we consume and how we sort of, what we buy and what we wear and what we eat and, you know, what we then do with the products that we then consume, right? And I think ultimately it's a big part of it is going to come around behaviour change. I think the profiling, the branding awareness around Re-London is going to be really important. London Climate Action Week is going to be a huge opportunity for us to really use that as a set-piece moment to think about how we, again, use that as a way to really profile Re-London and boost and really profile the circular economy and think about how, again, we work with London councils to deliver on that as well. So I think, you know, looking at the profiling and those strategic aims is part of my role, but by no means we're satisfied. And, you know, part of my role is to make sure that we're able to deliver on the ambitions that we set out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, you know, everything that you're talking about, you know, these are things that have been, you know, ever since this environment strategy was published in, well, this is actually the consultation one, which came out in August 2017. But all of these discussions around, you know, how do you deal with the challenge of estates? How do you deal with the challenge of recycling from flats? Are things that Re-London have been thinking about over these last years. You know, what is it that you think needs to shift to actually make those changes in recycling rates so that London is an exemplar of recycling and reuse and reducing overall waste arisings? What do you think that Re-London needs, apart from you coming along as chair, to actually help it to deliver what's needed?
Yeah, I think, look, partly my role, if appointed as chair, would be to work with the team at Re-London, at the GLA, to further explore, you know, where we can sort of make sure that we meaningfully sort of look at our priorities and where we can sort of maximise on that. So part of it would be, not to give you a cop-out answer, but part of it would be I'll have to sort of like wait to get into that role, to work with the team to actually devise these plans and understand, again, where best Re-London can deploy its resources. What I would say is that some of the national reforms that I spoke about that is required to happen to really get us to a place where we can start to see the levels of recycling that we need to see in the country and in London happen. Those are some of the things that, you know, have been stagnant for a long time in the country, but things are happening now, or we hope. And that's what, you know, something that I'll be banging the drum for London as we move forward.
Okay, so it sounds like, so are you comfortable with the amount of resource that Re-London has at the moment?
I couldn't yet possibly comment on that until once I know the full picture, if I'm appointed as chair.
Okay, thank you. So one of the downsides of not enough recycling happening is that we end up with a reliance on too much incineration. Now, the Mayor has rightly been against the expansion of incineration capacity in London. Are you expecting that Re-London will be making objections to the current DCO for the expansion to the Quarry incinerator?
I'm not aware of such detail. Yeah, I think it's something that I'll need to pick up.
What about in your role as Deputy Mayor?
The Mayor's been very clear about his objection against, and that he doesn't want to see any further capacity created for incineration in London.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if we could just have a brief interlude, if we could welcome the school council, hello, from Central Foundation Boys School in Islington. Does that sound correct? Welcome to our meeting. Welcome to our meeting this morning. This is a confirmation hearing, so we're discussing with the Mayor's Deputy Mayor for the Environment about him being appointed to chair Re-London, which looks at recycling and waste across London. So that's what we're discussing this morning. If I could just actually sticking with this question about incineration. So as Cabinet Member in Hackney, I believe you were vocally sort of supportive of the Edmonton incinerator. Obviously, as you've just said, that's somewhat at odds with the Mayor's position. And it's also at odds with the idea of a circular economy, because what I've seen, I have right in the middle of my constituency, the incinerator on Beddington Lane. And once you build this thing, it's like a sort of all-devouring monster, and the contract requires or permits them to incinerate as much as they can. And so once the thing is built, it's very hard to control what goes to it. And so then the concept of a sort of zero waste circular economy goes out the window, or up the flue, you might say. So, I mean, how does your track record of supporting incinerators square with, obviously, your newfound position, presumably in a non-political way, supporting the Mayor's opposition? And how does, going back, what was your thinking in supporting incineration and the impact that that has on circular economy?
Yeah, I think specifically in relation to a question about the Edmonton Eco Park that was voted through, that was to replace...
I mean, Eco Park sounds lovely. Are we talking about an incinerator in Edmonton or...?
You can call it the Energy from Waste Facility, either one of those things.
Okay.
I think the key thing is it was there to replace an existing one which wasn't currently, which had loads of issues, and there was issues around the turbine. As a result of that, many of the North London Waste Authority had to regularly actually send waste to either different incinerators, because obviously the existing one wasn't working, or it had to send it to different parts of the UK. Obviously, given the large tons of waste that is produced across those 7 different boroughs in North London, there is no other borough, there is no other incineration capacity in London that could have taken in that level of waste from North London Waste Authority. So the only way North London Waste Authority could have dealt with it would be to either send it to a different part of the UK if there were capacity to take over 350k tonnes of waste a year, or to a different part of Europe, or to a different part of the world, or to send to landfill. And the responsible thing to do was to deal with the waste. And so it was about replacing an existing incinerator with the ambition, obviously, to reduce waste. I think, as I've said before, the key thing here is we look at the source of the problem, and it's about shifting to an economy where we want to see, such products not produced in the first place, and that's the work we need to be really focused on.
You don't see, though, that obviously incineration, increasing the incineration capacity undermines that work?
Undermines what work?
Sorry, you just said the overall objective is to reduce the amount of waste that we produce. Yeah. And my experience seems to be that once you build an incinerator, the company that operates the incinerator is both contractually entitled to and financially incentivized to keep feeding it, which is the opposite of reducing waste.
Well, I think in relation to the specific incinerator that you're referring to, it's about replacing an existing one. And as I say, if you didn't do that, the alternative was to send to landfill, which would have been way worse for the environment, and that was the responsible thing to do.
So is it help me clarify then. So it's just the Edmonton one that you thought was a good idea, and incinerators generally you're not in favour of, or was it case by case? There are some you would support, some you wouldn't.
No, I think what we're talking about is not increasing the capacity of new incineration in London. I think the case you're specifically referring to is about the specific, is specifically about the replacement of an existing incinerator, which is two different things.
Okay. So the new Edmonton incinerator, was that the same capacity as the old Edmonton incinerator, or was that an increase in capacity?
So the new Edmonton incinerator looked at slightly increasing the capacity, but the increase in capacity was in line with it, taking into account the population growth in North London areas up to beyond basically the lifetime of it. So, and one of the commitments that we got from the North London Waste Authority, which is one of the things that I lobbied for when I was on the board of North London Waste Authority, is to make sure that it didn't always have to operate at 100% of capacity. So, for example, if we didn't have that much waste produced, so we sort of built for what the waste tonnage was forecasted. If we didn't have that much waste produced, then it can operate at less than that amount. And we also committed to making sure that we don't end up in a situation where we basically commercially just pull in waste from different areas and it just becomes a commercial market.
Sorry, so you began this little exchange by telling me that you weren't in favour of increasing, and now you've told me that that did increase.
Now, what I'm telling you is that the incinerator in Edmonton was built to meet the demand of the waste tonnage forecasted in the North London Waste area. Well, and it would have been the same in the previous...
No, but sorry, that's what you're telling me now, but you began by saying that you weren't, it was just a replacement and you weren't in favour of increasing it. And now, only because I directly asked you, you seem to have admitted that it did increase it.
I mean, just to correct myself, what I'm not in favour is building off new incinerators that didn't exist before.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you, I mean, I don't want to be pedantic, but it seems obvious to me that if you take an existing incinerator site and you put a new incinerator on that site that is significantly larger, then that's not materially different from keeping that one the same size and adding another one over there. How is that better?
Well, I mean, look, I'm not an expert on how you build infrastructure like that, but I think, the aim of the Edmonton...
Well, I suppose what I'm saying, look, if you think about this mathematically, look, if you have an incinerator that does 10 units of incineration, and you either expand it from 10 to 15, or build another one somewhere else that does 5, you still end up with 15, don't you? So I don't see how that's... If the objective is not to increase incineration capacity, because you don't want to disincentivize reduction
The point about building the new one wasn't because we felt like we just wanted to build a new one. It was because the old one was failing. It wasn't working no more.
But then the new one had increased capacity.
To meet the forecasted waste that was built into the amount of basically, to meet the forecasted waste tonnage that was predicted with the North London Waste Authorities, yeah.
Okay. Assemblymember Russell, I think, is itching to come in. Let me just ask you about another point that you just raised. You were talking about... well, let me let Assemblymember Russell in, because she's bursting, I think. I don't want to...
Yeah, no, I'm just... This is about Edmonton, because I did a lot of work on Edmonton back when I was on Environment Committee. To meet the forecast waste tonnage, the whole point about everything in the environment strategy and what Re-London are doing is about trying to reduce overall waste arisings. So the Edmonton incinerator was being built to meet forecast waste tonnage, was actually enabling that increase in incineration, rather than thinking about, so if the North London Waste Authority had actually thought maybe that old incinerator wasn't working and they wanted to build something that was exactly the same capacity, would have been one thing, but they've actually built something that is bigger, so there is less incentive to reduce the waste arisings. So leaving aside your feelings about and your opinion around incineration, do you see that the increase of capacity at Edmonton is actually a challenge for Re-London and for you as Deputy Mayor in terms of delivering on the targets in the environment strategy for reducing waste arisings in London?
Yeah. Didn't get to say goodbye to the kids who just left. So look, I think firstly, look, I'm not a spokesperson for North London Waste Authority. Obviously, in my role as Deputy Mayor, I'm focused on how we can make sure that we increase recycling, we reduce waste in London, and also, you know, in relation to the North London Waste Authority, to the incinerator that you're specifically referring to, the Mayor has obviously no powers, as you know. That was signed off by the government of the time in 2017.
Signed off by the local authorities that are part of the North London Waste Authority.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
Who you presumably would like to be influencing to reduce their waste arisings to help the Mayor meet his environment targets.
These things ain't exclusive to one another. You can obviously meet your objectives on how you deal with waste, because you can't pretend that waste doesn't exist. You have to do with the waste. You have to deal with the waste that exists there. And as I said to you before, in relation to that specific case, if you didn't deal with it, then you'd have to send it to landfill, or you'd have to send it to the Global South somewhere. So the only option was, I just want to respond, because there was an options paper that the North London Waste Authority did produce, which looked at every other alternative and how you could deal with that level of tonnage of waste. And there was no other sorts of technology. The only other options was to send it to landfill, and that's not something that we wanted to see happen for that. But what I'm focused on moving forward is obviously making sure that we're able to reduce waste at its source, and making sure that we're working across all the boroughs to make that happen.
But in that North London Waste Authority case, by working to forecast waste tonnages, not actual waste tonnages, that built in more waste produced in London. And the whole point is that every single part of our public, the sort of public policy purpose should be about trying to reduce the waste produced in the first place. Because the waste, it comes by the way we do business, the way things get packaged, the way, you know, and we do have a lot of choices in terms of how we reduce that packaging, how we reduce the amount of waste that exists. And I just sort of want to be clear that you're clear about how we don't have to provide the capacity for burning the amount of stuff that someone is projecting might exist.
Well, look, as I've said at this committee already and the confirmation hearing, my focus is obviously making sure that we're working together to reduce waste at its source, making sure that we obviously get the legislative change that we need nationally to see the change that we need to see across London, but also making sure that we're working across all the different boroughs to make sure that we deliver on our ambitions to help meet the London Environment Strategy's targets, but also the Mayor's vision for London.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, are there any... Oh, sorry, there was one other thing I was going to come back to. So you mentioned, sticking with the Edmonton example, you mentioned that one of the things you tried to avoid was this problem of once you build it, the company operating it can then just keep feeding it to full capacity, and you mentioned that you tried to avoid that. How would you try to avoid that? Because my experience, or my understanding of the one in Sutton, is that even if the South London Waste Partnership doesn't send it sufficient, doesn't send it 100% of capacity's worth of waste, the contract allows the company operating it just to, sell the capacity they have remaining to whoever they like. You know, they could sell it to Surrey, let's say, and then it gets trucked up the A23. Presumably, I mean, I just assumed that was normal. Is that not normal? Is that not what happened in Edmonton?
I mean, if it's useful, Chair, I can ask, I could perhaps write to North London Waste Authority to send to you to explain on how they sort of they work that, and then you can obviously work with Sutton on that too.
Well, it's just that you said earlier that it hadn't done that. So it just seems to me obvious that when a business sets up something like an incinerator, energy from waste facility, whatever, they want it to run at 100% because they've got the fixed capital investment of building it.
Sure.
And having built it, they obviously want to run it at capacity to get the money back. That's how business works. So I just but you suggested that the Edmonton one wasn't like that, so I was curious to understand.
That was
why.
the assurances that I received. But as I say to you, my focus as Deputy Mayor, and obviously if appointed as Chair, is thinking about how we reduce waste. There are some great businesses operating across London, like I met with, for example, with Nopla, fantastic small business actually based in Hackney Wick, which is using seaweed technology to think about how we can reduce plastic at its source, and they've got some great asks for a convening policy group that they've got around how we can reduce plastic more broadly, connecting them with the London Marathon too. Those are the sorts of things that I'll be focused on in thinking about how we reduce those types of material in the first place, so we don't have to think about incineration.
Okay, I mean, I suspect we'll be thinking about incineration for quite a while to come. But now we move on to something else. We have Assembly Member Bakari, who's joining us remotely for the next question.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was good to hear about the need to work with others from the Deputy Mayor across party, which is fantastic news, considering that the top 6 councils for recycling are all Liberal Democrat run. So I hope to see you learning from all of the councils that have been doing really, really well, and particularly the Liberal Democrat run councils. But I'm going to be asking about food waste. Now, over the past few years, reducing food waste has been a priority for London. 50% reduction in food waste and associated packaging waste per head is a target by 2030. There was a target of 2020 for food waste collections to be collected curbside as well. So do you feel as if your priority will still continue to be food waste in your new role, if selected?
Yeah, thank you, Assembly Member Bakari. I'm sorry you couldn't join us in person. I thought obviously I had the pleasure of working with you lots before you even became an Assembly Member, before I was the Deputy Mayor. So really looking forward to working together in my new role as Deputy Mayor, and if appointed as Chair of London. Absolutely, there's lots of changes that are going to be coming forward with around food waste, particularly thinking about the Simply Recycling and the sort of the expectations that would be set out on businesses and local authorities as we move forward in the forthcoming years. My job, if appointed as the Chair of London, would be thinking about how do we make sure that we get the adequate support for boroughs to be able to deal with the additional responsibility that will be set out to them, and also for the businesses too. But again, really the point is that point that I've always made at the start is how do we get to the source of the problem, which is around making sure that we deal with it right at the core to not get to that point, essentially, and reduce some waste in the first place.
Just on that point of the fact that there was this reduction target of 50%, it wasn't just from food waste, it was the associated packaging waste. You were just mentioning earlier about these innovative ways that you've been looking into, for example, plastic, which I thought was really interesting. Well, how are you working with the big players like supermarkets? Is that going to be part of the role that you'll be playing too?
Absolutely, that is a great point, actually, and I'm glad that you actually raised this, because a key part of, I think, being Chair of London is about thinking about all the different key stakeholders, and the private sector and the big supermarkets and businesses are going to be really important to think about the packaging for the waste itself. We also know that there's going to be additional set of responsibilities for local authorities when it comes to mixed recycling sort of use as well, mixed plastic use, as well, from 2028 onwards. And so making sure that they're adequately sort of equipped with that level of support. But again, making sure really at the heart of that, we're not producing the waste in the first place. And obviously the extended user responsibility and packaging responsibility for these businesses are going to be a really important step as we move forward.
Thank you. That's fine. That's all for me, Chair.
Okay, I don't see any other indications on that question. In that case, we go to the next question. Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you. microphone, yes. So, to what extent will Re-London's priorities be driven by national policy, things like the new extended producer responsibility regulations that are coming into effect next year?
Sorry, can you just repeat? To what extent would...
To what extent will Re-London's priorities be driven by national policy, like the new extended producer responsibility regulations?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the first. Thanks, Assemblyman Russell. I think ultimately, Re-London has to be able to respond and adapt and make sure that it's maximising, the possibility for London in obviously, very changing. And as I mentioned earlier, we have very highly complex waste systems in London. I think Re-London has a huge role to play in influencing government and DEFRA. The government has obviously announced a new task force around a circular economy. Not sure yet what's coming out of that, but of course Re-London will have a huge role in making sure that it's making representation, be it to that, but also around sort of some of the key priorities to government, but also making sure that it's working with London boroughs to make sure that we make collective asks and making the right level of influencing that's going to be taken to government. So I think, Re-London's role has to be some of that strategic influence and role that we need to sort of like help shape government, because actually what we have seen in London is that there are good examples of what does work really well, but what we essentially need is exactly the point that you've been making throughout this meeting today is that we need much more, we need things to move much more quicker and much more at scale to see the change that we need to meet our ambitious targets in the London Environment Strategy.
Mm-hmm. So, obviously, Re-London is has statutory obligations, but it's got no reliable funding stream. So, in terms of your lobbying to government, are you, what kind of income stream are you going to be looking for? Income streams from the extended producer responsibility, or kind of maybe a deposit return scheme, so that you get the funding to actually support Re-London to do more than it's able to do at the moment?
I think the first thing to say is we've got to work with the boroughs in being able to deliver this. And I say that because obviously the way in which...
Boroughs aren't going to provide you with any extra funding. I was wondering about whether you're going to... The question is about whether you're going to, the money that comes from the extended producer...
Which goes to the boroughs.
...responsibilities, does it go to the boroughs? Or, has that been decided where that money's going yet?
I believe so. I think it does go to the boroughs, unless I'm willing to be corrected if I may be wrong on that.
And do you think it would be worth, for instance, as chair of Re-London, making a bid for some of that funding from the extended producer responsibility coming to Re-London, so that you can deliver that kind of pan-London communication that is clearly going to be needed if we're going to reduce the waste arisings in London?
Yeah, I think, look, firstly, as I say, I keep talking about the boroughs because obviously that's where ultimately most of the action is taken, and also the funding does go directly to the boroughs. What we can do, Assemblymember Russell, is play a strategic role to make sure that with the money that does come to London, exactly like you say, there's a much more strategic approach.
Sorry, which money?
That, for example, the EPR money that comes to the boroughs that you referred to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that money that does go to the boroughs, for example, we need to make sure that there is a alignment across the boroughs around the vision and how we maximise to be able to do that. But I think, again, I can only say for now, once if I am appointed as chair, my role will be to work with Re-London to look at how we can get a much more sustainable finance on this agenda, and obviously again work with boroughs to really drive this forward.
Okay, so that, yeah, a bit disappointing really that because it seems like this this extended producer responsibility where these packaging companies it's effectively, it's a bit like a plastic bag tax, but it's on the companies that are producing the waste rather than on the consumers. So this is a new source of funding. So you really haven't, you're really not thinking this could be something that could actually help deliver more resource for London to do their job effectively?
Well, it might, but it's not for me to decide. It's for the boroughs to, and that's why it's really important that, coming into this role, if I'm appointed, would be to work with the boroughs to make sure that we've got that strategic approach and alignment that you referred to. But it won't be for me to decide. It's for the boroughs individually to decide that.
Yes, but presumably you would, as chair of the board of London, London would have a strategic objective in terms of all of this, in terms of delivering on your responsibilities.
Sure. I'm sorry if I didn't understand that first time you did ask it, but absolutely. I think our role, just to be very clear from a London perspective, would be around working with the boroughs to develop that vision and strategy, and working with the boroughs to make sure that we maximise what's coming out of the EPR and the funding that is coming. Excuse me, sorry, my cough. But obviously, as I say to you, we can't act or take decisions without the boroughs, which is why they're really important.
OK, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblymember Russell. Assemblymember Wilson, I think the next question.
Thank you, Chair. Assemblymember Russell's already started to touch on this question of resource and financing with the very specific angle of the extended producer responsibility. But looking more widely, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the kind of wider sustainability of London's finances. I mean, the briefing note that we've been circulated before this meeting shows a substantial deficit in 2022, in 2023, and still in 2024-25, again, a projected substantial deficit. So how do we make this organisation wash its own face? How do you envisage looking for more revenue streams, or managing expenditure more carefully to ensure that it is sustainable going forwards?
Yeah, that's a great question. Assemblymember Wilson, as I said in my opening remarks as well, I think one of the big challenges facing London is about its financial future, and it's about making sure that it's future-proof financially, but only if it works for Londoners and for London and our vision that's set out in the London Environment Strategy, GLA, the Mayor, obviously the ambitions of government and Londoners itself. So going into the role, one of the first tasks that I'll be looking to do is to work with the team at London to make sure that I get a better understanding of that landscape, thinking about how we could diversify our funding. Going back to Assemblymember Russell's point, thinking about how do we leverage on the collective funding that's coming to London, how do we leverage money from the private sector, thinking about how it could be effectively utilised, particularly in some of those different areas as well. So I think, that would be part of my role, would be coming in, and that's one of the sort of the key metrics that I'll be setting myself for success over this next term if I'm appointed as chair.
OK. Assemblymember Russell, I think we're back to.
We are.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh.
Do you mind if I just have a quick...
That's absolutely fine. We'll take a couple of minute adjournment, and we shall return in a moment. OK. Okay, thank you everyone for bearing with us during our short adjournment. We now continue the confirmation hearing with some questions from Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you very much, Chair. So yes, my question, London's current 5-year business plan runs until 2025. So when do you expect to develop a new long-term business plan, and what's that process going to involve?
That's something that I'll be looking to work with the team at London is to sort of establish clear timelines around when we can sort of deliver the business plan, and obviously how what stakeholders that we work with to sort of develop that. So that's something that, if appointed to becoming chair, I'll be able to confirm in the new year.
Okay, but who might you, just off the top of your head, who might the stakeholders that you were going to engage with be?
Well, I think, firstly, I think there's an important role for the boroughs to play, businesses to play, Londoners to play, some of the key industry representatives from across the different areas that we're trying to influence. Of course, engagement with stakeholders and any government, insights that we have from government as well. I think all of those things that are things that we should be taking into account. Of course, the GLA itself and our role and the waste and circular economy team over here. Assembly members, should they wish to sort of feed in as well through the appropriate means. I think, these are all stakeholders that we should be talking to. We want to make sure that it's as inclusive as planned as possible, and one that we can create that co-ownership around.
Great, thank you very much. In terms of staffing, how many staff does the GLA and London have working on waste? And are you expecting the staffing requirement for this work on waste to increase or decrease?
I believe for London, and I could be totally wrong, so I think, just to be very clear about that, but I think we're talking about maybe 30, 40 people who work on this from a London perspective. And I believe from a GLA perspective, it's around 5. But again, those are numbers that we can confirm to you.
That would be great. And
sure.
do you see the requirement for staff? Do you see this as a growing area of activity, or do you see it as an area that's staying where it is?
It's difficult to say, because we obviously have to review the priorities if I'm appointed as chair, and also understanding, for example, how some of the national reforms that we're talking about come into play. Going back to Assembly Member Wilson's question around sort of the financial picture and what, where we are financially. These are all things to consider. But of course, what I do want to make sure is that we have an adequately resourced team, both from a GLA and a London perspective, to be able to deliver on that ambition that we need. So we can't do this on a shoestring. We need to make sure that we have the best people in London who are working on this agenda to make sure that we deliver on the London Environment Strategy and our targets that are set out there.
Okay, might be worth going after a bit of that that producer responsibility money to help on deliver on that. The missions and mandates. Where does waste fit into the missions and mandates?
I should just say, before I do respond to your second question as well, the one bit I didn't mention, just because you mentioned the boroughs about the EPR as well, I think there is also an opportunity from a financial perspective as well, where we can look at, for example, how we can, although we can't dictate to boroughs what they to do with their money, I think it's really important to think about, for example, like how can we sort of like best strategically channel that money to help meet some of our objectives too. So I think that collaboration point is really important. I think on the mission and mandates, they sort of sit within the, they're not yet public. So that will be obviously public in due course, and you'll obviously see more in relation to that. But I think it's in the non-residential emissions section, but you should receive that once it's made public.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit in the budget papers that's come out on waste, and it's promoting the circular economy statements required in the London Plan, influencing industry to adopt more sustainable circular approaches, and improving understanding of London's patterns of consumption and waste generation, how they may change over time so their environmental and health impacts can be reduced. and there's a little piece of overview that say other levers to decarbonise supply chains, minimise waste and support the circular economy. It's a small bit in the budget papers, but you will be fighting the corner of waste reduction, will you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you think that waste could be a sort of perfect case to use that sort of strong? You keep talking about the boroughs, but actually it's the boroughs and London government and national government working across these layers that could actually help. Do you think that it's that sort of cross layers of government that could actually help deliver on these targets that have been being missed now for many, many years?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you need to have that partnership across all layers of government to be able to deliver on the ambitions that we set out. We all have, each of us, in terms of all of the different layers of government that you've described, have a different role to play in making sure that we're enabling and supporting the other layers of government to meet that. And that's partly my role as Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, and it's what I'll be bringing into my role as also as the Chair of Re-London if appointed.
Okay, so because earlier you've been quite clear about not dictating to the boroughs, but you do see that there is a role of working in partnership from that sort of London-wide strategic point of view. I
think the point I was trying to make there is not to have a top-down approach, but actually to sort of work collaboratively with boroughs. That's not to say that obviously that GLA won't have a role to play or we won't have a role to play. Of course we will, and we can play an important role in being able to make sure that we do some of that influencing, the enabling part that can help support boroughs in moving much more faster and unlocking some of the opportunities that they need to accelerate on this agenda. But of course, what we want to do is making sure that we're working hand in hand with boroughs rather than sort of dictating to boroughs. So that collaborative partnership working rather than sort of the top-down approach is what I'm referring to.
Okay, and then just finally, the waste reduction and recycling plans, the RRPs. They've been the Mayor's main technique for pushing the boroughs to reduce waste arisings and increase recycling. Do you have any anticipated actions that you're hoping to see for the next batch of waste reduction and recycling plans?
The next batch of
waste reduction and recycling plans that the boroughs
what was the question though? Sorry,
producing. So, those waste reduction and recycling plans have been the Mayor's main tool for generating activity. So what are you hoping to see in the next batch of these waste reduction and recycling plans?
Yeah, I think that's something that, again, like it's, I still need to review as we move forward. So I'll be working with the team at the GLA to sort of really understand, where is it that we can best focus our efforts that can really leverage and sort of see the maximum outputs or outcomes for what we know has worked and where we know we can work, especially with some of the changes that are coming nationally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further indications, so I think that brings our questioning to an end. Thank you very much. So can I thank you, Mete, for attending today's meeting, and you're now free to leave. And you may choose to sit in the public gallery if you wish to view our deliberations, or you may feel there's something more important to do. Either way, thank you very much for attending our hearing this morning.
Thank you, Assembly Member Garrett and Chair, and also thank you to all members of the committee. If I don't see you before New Year's, have a great Christmas and New Year's, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to put forward my case.
Thanks very much. And a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you as well. Thanks. On behalf of the committee, officially, Very well, yes, I think you might be right, actually. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so the committee is now required to make a decision on its recommendation to the Mayor as to whether or not the nominee should be appointed as Chair of Re-London. And there are three possible resolutions that we can reach. Firstly, that it be agreed to recommend that the Mayor should proceed with his appointment of Mette Koban to the office of Chair of Re-London. Secondly, that it be agreed not to object to the proposed appointment. And thirdly, that it be agreed not to recommend that the Mayor should proceed with his appointment. So those are our three options that we can land on. Would anyone like to start off the discussion? All rush at once?
I was a bit concerned about the lack of urgency about the need to meet the targets on reducing waste arisings from London. And I was particularly concerned by the acceptance of the North London Waste Authority decision to build more incineration capacity to deal with projected waste arisings based on business as usual, rather than to have done everything possible to reduce projected waste arisings with actions by the relevant boroughs, so that such a big incineration capacity did not need to, extra incineration capacity did not need to be built in the first place. So that's just off the top of my head, a couple of things that concerned me.
Okay. Anyone else? I mean, I had some points, but since I'm chair, I like to let other people go first. I mean, I would say, well, sorry, were you drawing breath to...
Yes, I will, because obviously it's different to the previous chair that we've had, and everyone has sort of strengths and weaknesses. I think what he could bring to the role is, obviously he's been working in this space with other local authorities for quite a while. He's known and respected in this field. It's obviously very different to the previous chair we've had, but I think he can probably add something different in terms of bringing the local providers and the waste authorities on board with what we want to see and achieve in terms of reduction of waste in London.
Okay.
He seems to have thought about it a lot, about the issues, and the bit that he said in particular around people living their lives and what they do in their day-to-day activities, I think is something probably we've not had a major London-wide focus on.
Okay. I mean, I agreed. My concerns about incineration. I agree with your point, Caroline, about particularly. I suppose I was concerned that he said that he was against increasing it, and then more or less admitted that plan, which he had vocally supported, did increase it. I didn't feel that was good. I suppose on your point about comparison with the previous chair. So the previous chair had a pretty impressive CV. She was. Where I've got it in my notes here, Senior Fellow and Director of Food Loss and Waste at the World Resources Institute, previously Chief Executive Officer at the UK Government's Waste, WRAP, the Waste Resource Action. I mean, so these were sort of quite big jobs on a big scale, which I think, realistically we probably would agree, Mette doesn't have. So then the question would be, what does he have instead? And he sort of leaned quite a lot on his experience in Hackney, which, with all due respect to Hackney, is not impressive. If he's going to say, look, this is my track record in Hackney, I'm picturing the leader of Bromley thinking, okay, what do you have to tell me, bearing in mind I'm already exceeding the Mayor's target for household recycling, and you were at about 2/3 of it. In terms of authority or, the sort of personal sense of, here's my track record that I can stand on, I'm going to come and, lead this thing London-wide, I'm not sure how well that would work. Particularly, I'd say, even some of the inner London boroughs that I gave examples of, they're doing much better. Maybe we should have someone from Camden or Lewisham or, what was the other example, Islington. Yes, Assemblyman Baker.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I was just checking over what the role of the chair is, because obviously there's been talk about the person who did it previously, but it isn't actually it's to provide the leadership, provide clarity of purpose, bring the board together. So that's less of a concern to me if he can provide that clarity of purpose, provide that leadership, sort of talk about, as he was talking about, share the best practice across London, which may or may not be Hackney. Do you know what I mean? I think it's quite reasonable that somebody is going to talk about their previous experience. So that is not really a concern for me. I think that the discussion about, and he had raised it, there was a lot of further discussion about making sure that things aren't getting into waste rather than having to deal with them as recycling, and he'd actually raised that quite a lot earlier when I'd asked a question. So that clearly was quite core to what he was saying. And also, I mean, I know that the incinerator was a hot topic previously. I don't think it should be material in. I understand that people disagree with decisions or positions people are taking. I wouldn't like it to be material, sort of effectively a political campaign previously. I understand what you're saying, both of you, but that just feels a little bit. Beyond the bounds of looking at people's skills and experience to carry out a role.
Okay. Before you do that, let's all have one go. Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you. It's probably the most kind of interesting, but of the 4 confirmation hearings we've done so far, certainly the most contentious, perhaps, and disagreement. Whereas I think the 3 previous ones have all been very clear that that the candidate is qualified, is experienced, and is of the right character to do all those jobs. So I'm sort of struggling a bit here. I think the question of inconsistency, I think, and I mean, you talked about the position on the incinerator as an example of that, and without trying to kind of go back and do the rights and wrongs of the new incinerator, but it's clearly an issue. I think the inconsistency over, as the Chair has said, using one's track record as effectively the trump card as why you think you're best placed to take the job, and then actually, under a bit of investigation, perhaps there isn't quite such a strong trump card. And then, I appreciate my first question was slightly flippant, but that does kind of still stick in my core. But being lectured about doing things when you're being lectured by someone who does the complete opposite. But I think the other question, and I think this is a question that is almost incidental to whoever the individual candidate was, but both, I think, Assembly Member Russell and Garrett querying the wisdom of combining this role with another appointed role, one of which being political and one of which not being political. I think that's something that I have a degree of concern about, regardless of who the applicant was. So that's just kind of my thoughts. I don't know whether those thoughts are necessarily leading, but that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Okay. Just for clarity, I think I'm right in saying that the previous Deputy Mayor, Shirley Rodriguez, was on Re-London but didn't chair it. I think that's correct.
So there is a connection between the 2 roles that's been certainly long-standing, if not forever. I think it's not unexpected that the Deputy Mayor for Environment would be involved in Re-London. I think we'd be probably asking questions if they weren't.
Sorry, do you want to speak?
I was just saying a lot of the Waste Authority appointees are councillors, I understand. Yeah. Who are obviously political, yeah.
Sorry, Assemblymember Russell, you did indicate a moment ago.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the incineration point, because increasing capacity for incineration is something that we've seen it with the Belvedere incinerator in South London, that the recycling rates went down as soon as that capacity got opened up, when that Belvedere incinerator first opened. So there is a very direct correlation between increased incinerator capacity and the Mayor's objectives in the strategy of reducing overall waste arisings. Those targets being missed, because once you've got that capacity for burning waste, then the incinerator needs to be fed. So irrespective of where one stands on incineration, there is an issue about increasing incineration capacity in relation to the Mayor's target. So that was the point I was making, not a point about whether you burn waste or not, which obviously is outside of of this, but the actual piece about increasing the capacity for burning waste actually undermines the Mayor's targets for reducing overall waste arising. And I'm sure if Assemblymember Cooper was here, we'd be hearing, from your group about because I work very closely with her on the Environment Committee.
Wasn't the point I was making, Assemblymember Russell, but thank you for the further expansion.
Sorry, you weren't making. In which case, I think I misunderstood your point about the incineration. Do you want to clarify?
The point I was making is I think that it wouldn't be appropriate to weigh very heavily stances that people had taken that were involved around very heavily politically influenced campaigns, which would be, and obviously you have very established, but so that was my point, not to get into the great detail of the rights and wrongs of building major infrastructure for the future.
So
that was it. So that was my point. It was a personal point that I thought that because so I just wanted to put that. I didn't really want to then talk about incineration for a great amount of time, because I already think we've already talked too much about incineration.
Okay. So, can I just clarify, though, that my point was about the lack of understanding about the relationship between incineration capacity and the targets in the Mayor's strategy, and that was just that was the point that concerned me.
Okay, I mean, I think just before I know you've indicated, but just I assume you're going to talk about something else. Yeah. So just on this then, yes, I think I can see the point about the water under the bridge argument, which is sort of what you're saying. That was then, this is now. I suppose my concern is that it comes back to the point about the CV. So his CV, his track record of working in the industry and the sector is not as strong as his predecessor. So he needs to bring something else. And so, the fact of, albeit, I don't know how long ago this Edmonton row was, actually, I assume a couple of years ago. It's another, could have been a strength, but it isn't point, I suppose. Perhaps that would be the point of agreement, that it isn't a, no? I shall abandon my attempt to seek consensus in that case, and I'll bring in Assemblymember Harani, who was going to talk about something else.
No, on that point, I just reiterate what I said at the beginning, really, about it being, about what the role is and what the role of chair is, about bringing people and the organisations across London together to tackle these issues, which obviously has been Deputy Mayor for a few months now, as another significant role where similar skills are required and needed. I did want to seek a bit of clarification, because my understanding was that the de facto chair of this is the Mayor of London. Is that correct?
I don't know. Is that correct? Sorry, I'm putting my mic on. I don't know. Do we know? Is that correct?
De facto chair of London now.
Yeah.
In the absence of the fact that the Mayor is appointing somebody, is that what you're suggesting? The fact that the Mayor is appointing somebody to chair it in his stead, in inverted commas?
Well, in the absence of there not being a chair, it falls to the Mayor.
I don't know if we know the answer to that.
We don't have the answer.
Yeah, we don't. But yeah, if it is, if we're able to clarify elsewhere, but that would the political versus non-political argument. I don't think will be an issue.
Okay, I mean it is, in a sense, a political appointment, because obviously it's the Mayor who is making the appointment, and he, or as it may be she, has the freedom to appoint within reason whoever they wish. Did you have an answer to that? So you were pointing at something in your...
The brief that Alicia's pointing, she just says that it's it's the Mayor's representative to the board, basically.
Yeah, so maybe
it's not quite the same as the Mayor, but yeah.
The chair, and so wrapping up, as I said before, wrapping up in one role.
Okay. Were there any other indications? So, it seems to me the issues that have been raised, there is. Sorry, we did. Shall I read out what I think we've got? So we've got question mark about weak CV versus predecessor. Question mark about track record in Hackney, which I suppose is a potential compensating factor for the CV, but that is also a question mark in terms of Hackney itself, even among inner London boroughs, not being a leader, but actually, sitting, as I say, on the CPRE thing, it's 28 out of 33 in a sort of combined ranking of percent sent for recycling and total kilogram sent for disposal. Then there's a question about promoting new incinerator capacity. Question about conflict with the role of deputy mayor. Actually, there's a topic, that I jotted down. So perhaps before we summarise, we should discuss this, how we feel about this. I didn't ask any questions about the finances, but my sense was that he was a bit vague on what the problem or the solution to that was. So I'm throwing that out there. I don't know whether people agree or disagree with that, but I felt he was unclear on what the answer to the...
I think he explicitly said he'd find out if he was appointed. So you may be happy or unhappy with that, but that was the... So we did answer.
Okay.
And to be fair, he did say that would be one of the key priorities that he would look into as soon as getting the job.
Yeah, in fact, he did mention it in his opening statement as well, his sort of read out bit. I normally assume that the first question that the chair asks is met with a read out answer, and indeed it was, and it was included in that. So I think those are the five I have. I think this is now just my personal view. I think the conflict with the deputy mayor role, I'm not sure is made out. I think I'm inclined to think that since it's a mayoral appointment, by definition, that includes the possibility of it being someone who is political. Doesn't require it, but it includes the possibility for it, I think. I think maybe you could argue it isn't great, but I don't think it's disqualifying. As I say, the vagueness on the answers to finance, perhaps not, and he did bring that up. But that leaves, in my mind, the CV, the track record, and the promotion of incinerator capacity. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think there's also a kind of I think there's a need for some more reassurance about how the targets in the environment strategy are to be reached, and I do also think that it's not that it's inappropriate to be doing the two roles, but there are questions about how you balance doing the two roles, which might be interesting to tease out if we're doing a letter.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, just on that point, you certainly can. I was just going to say on that point, under my banner heading of weak track record, I think that incorporates your point, Senator Member Russell, about there's a lack of progress London-wide on recycling. And so one of the things he could have brought was, this is what we did in Hackney. It was really successful. This is, what I'm bringing to the table. And that wasn't what happened. Is that something distinct that you're bringing up separately from that?
I think it's distinct. I think it would have been good to have heard a really clear vision of kind of urgency about tackling the waste arisings in London, which are stubbornly high. It's incontrovertible that London is way behind on its waste reduction targets and on its recycling targets, and it would have been good to have heard a real urgency about addressing that, and I think that would be something that would be good.
That's about volumes rather than percentage recycles you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about
of arising.
That there are two things you have to do. You have to reduce the overall waste arisings, and then within that reduction of overall waste, you have to try and increase the amount of that either goes back in the circular economy or is recycled in some other way before you want to really minimise the bit that gets burned.
Understood. Okay. No, you're right. That is distinct. Senator Member Baker.
Thank you. I appreciate that many of us might have answered questions differently and have very strong views on these subjects, but We are supposed to be looking at the role of the chair. So if we are going to make any comments on it, I would really encourage us to relate it to the actual role, rather than effectively just sort of saying we'd like him to be a bit different on X, Y, and Z. It's got to be about the role. Otherwise, what are we here for? Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, it feels like we're just using our personal views on certain subjects. And that doesn't really feel fair. It doesn't really feel like what we're here to do. We're here to assess whether we think he can do this role. So let's have a look at the duties and responsibility to the role, and if they fit in your concerns with those things, then great. But let's try and do this properly.
Yeah. So for me, I think that's a fair point. For me, in our briefing here, we've got the role of the chair and mayor's representative on Re London. Says the official role description and responsibilities document sets out that the purpose of the role is to, then there's a series of bullet points, and the first one says to provide leadership for the strategic direction and governance of the London Waste and Recycling Board, which is the board of Re London, in order to achieve the aims of the organisation and contribute to the Mayor of London's priorities on waste recycling and the transition to a circular economy. So I think it's under that heading that, for me, these concerns about either sort of strength of CV and track record, it's under that category that I'm filing those weaknesses, I think. That's on page 5.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Not because I don't think that's reasonable.
So which one? Sorry, rather than me read out the whole page.
No, I'm definitely not asking you to read it, because we can all read it.
Yes.
But so that is the overall. So the duties and responsibilities. So if you're saying that the concerns are that in order to provide that leadership and figureheads, there are some issues that may make that more difficult, then fine. But let's be very explicit about that. Yeah.
Yep. I think it is that under that leadership role. Okay. So again, when it talks about again, I'm not going to read out the whole thing, but the 2 bullet points under leadership. Yeah. So if we think about his predecessor, she had which again I won't reiterate because we've already said what they are. I think she had the strength of track record of strength of previous roles to be able to provide the leadership, which he doesn't have. He could have, I think, has perhaps leaned on to his experience as a cabinet member to say, look, I've done it, I've been there, I've been, I'm not quite at the coalface, that makes it sound a bit overdramatic, but I've been doing it. And actually what he's done isn't very impressive. So I think it's a question mark about, is he in a position to provide leadership based on his CV and track record? How does that, being a leader is not an ability, is not a dictator. People have to say, yeah, I respect this person's track record, their CV, their ability to do this. And I think it's under that category that those particular concerns are filed, I think. But I can't speak for everybody. I don't know if that I see nodding. Okay.
Just as I said at the beginning, different people, different skills and experience set, different things they can bring to the table, and different strengths. And I think one of those strengths is bringing his previous role into this as someone who's worked in the sector, been on a similar platform to the others that will be on the board as well. I think we'll command some of that as well. But also, you mentioned at the beginning his role in a sort of major, in an international sense as the chief executive of a major charity as well, which for anyone who's worked in the voluntary sector, trying to get resources in, fundraise, get income in, I think is not an irrelevant or minor experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm conscious of time. Are there any new points that people want to bring up other than the ones, I attempted to summarise them earlier and we've sort of discussed my attempt to summarise. Are there any other points that haven't been brought up so far that we want to bring up? Nope. Okay, so we have on the table, I think, all of the fors and against. So we have to conclude with one of these 3 options. So let me suggest then, let's start with option 3, that it be agreed not to recommend that the Mayor should proceed with his appointment of Mete Coban, MBE, to the office of Chair of Re London. Is there support or opposition to that proposal?
Opposition.
Opposition to my proposal or opposition to the thing?
Opposition to saying not.
Okay.
No to 3.
Okay. So no to 3. So 2, that it be agreed not to object to the proposed appointment I'm not going to read out the whole thing if you forgive me, but hopefully we can.
I would be with that because I think there are things that we could put in a letter that would potentially even be helpful and constructive in terms of taking forward such a role.
Is there any other support for that, or are we looking to agree to recommend?
If that's the most likely way to get a consensus across the committee, then I'd go along with that second approach, but use that opportunity. So that's the kind of amber rating that we talked about in the pre-meeting. But yeah, use that opportunity to flag those concerns within that.
Okay, so you're. I don't want to put. So it sounds like you would support red or amber.
I think I would support red or amber, but if the way of getting consensus is to go with amber, which seems to be what somebody, Member Russell, has indicated, then I would be happy to go along with that.
And would I be right in thinking that you two would prefer that it be agreed that to recommend that the mayor should proceed?
I'm on agree.
Yeah, I agree. I just think we don't actually have a consensus about the points that have been raised, and in terms of the reasons, the things that he brings to the role, don't seem to have been considered, I think, versus the things that some people perceive they wouldn't have compared to the previous chair.
Okay, so I think then, I'm going to read out the whole thing. I'm going to call them recommend, not object, and not recommend, which is the official rather than a traffic light thing that I mentioned earlier. So it seems to me we've got 2 votes for recommend, 1 vote for not to object, and 2 for not to recommend. Is that correct? If I tallied that? So that would suggest that we would have a majority of 3 to 2 for not to object. So shall I then officially, having sort of scouted out where we are, shall I officially propose? Is that what I need to do? Do I need to propose, or somebody needs to propose one of these, and then somebody seconds it, and then we vote on it? Is that the correct procedure?
Yes, Chair, you definitely should propose one of the 3. It doesn't have to necessarily be seconded, but we would then need to see the number of votes and whether you did have a majority, bearing in mind that the chair can have a deciding vote if there is ever a tie.
Okay. Okay, well, I was going to say we can't have it unless somebody disappears in the next. Oh, somebody could abstain. That's true. I always forget that option. I'm turning into Andrew Boff, aren't I, with opposition to abstention. Okay, so, well, let me propose then that it be agreed not to recommend that the mayor should proceed with his appointment. So that's my proposal, and I'm voting in favour of that. Is anyone else in favour of that? 2 votes. That is not carried. Okay, then, can I propose that it be agreed not to object to the proposed appointment of Mette Coban to the office of Chair of Re London and to write to the mayor with further comment? So I'm voting in favour of that. 3 votes in favour of that. So that is carried. We don't need to proceed any further then, do we? So we have a majority decision. I don't know if you want your vote. Do I need to check if there's votes against or? Well, I like to try and follow a process rather than wing it.
I think it's clear in terms of outcomes.
Okay. So.
Chair, members can ask for their votes to be recorded in the minutes if they wish.
Sorry, that's the final question. So the final question is that it be agreed to recommend that the mayor should proceed with his appointment of Mette Coban, MBE, to the office of Chair of Re London. Any votes in favour of that? 2 votes in favour of that. Okay, and just to check for abstention, so votes against that? 3 votes against that. So only because if we all abstained, then potentially we have 2 different majorities. Okay, so in that case, we then have a majority decision in favour of not objecting to the proposed appointment and to write to the mayor with further comment. And do we want to clarify now? I'm just conscious of time. Do we want to clarify now what those comments are? I think the team have been jotting down what we said. Is there anything that people want to? If you want to so what have we got here? So, that's just you've just jotted down what I said earlier.
Have you been making notes while the conversation's been heard? Could you circulate what you think you've got, and we'll respond by the end of today?
So you'd be delegating authority?
So that would be delegating authority to me as chair to do that. So, okay. So in that case, can we delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree the additional comments in our letter to the mayor? Hopefully we can all agree that. Good. And thank you. So a letter, so we will circulate that letter. If you can circulate a draft. Actually, what's the deadline? We need to get that done quite quickly, don't we?
Yeah. Thursday's the extra one, but
I think there is a goal of getting it settled by the close of play on Wednesday. So I think if you can circulate a draft today, we can get all of our thoughts back by close of play Tuesday, which hopefully should then mean we can get the letter off on Wednesday. Yep. Okay. Good. Thank you, everyone. So a letter will be sent to the Mayor following this meeting to confirm the committee's recommendations. As I have no other business, that concludes today's meeting. So I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you.